Maya was exhausted. The long hours at her internship, the endless to-do lists, the pressure to impress her bosses, it all weighed on her. It was the middle of the week and her energy was running on fumes. She boarded the bus to work, a little earlier than usual to avoid the rush, but still surrounded by the usual morning crowd. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry, moving with purpose as they made their way to their respective destinations. She found a seat near the back of the bus, next to the window. It was the perfect spot for her to zone out for a few moments before the day began. Her fingers curled around the strap of her bag, and she pulled it closer to her, trying to find some comfort in the familiar weight. The noise of the city blended into a dull hum in the background, and Maya let her head rest back against the seat. She was feeling the weight of her responsibilities like never before. As an intern, she had been given a variety of tasks, some of which had been exhilarating, but others, like researching spreadsheets and sending emails, felt like a never-ending grind. The pressure to stand out was relentless, and though she worked late into the night, it felt like no matter what she did, there was always more to prove. The bus bumped along, jolting her from her thoughts. Maya closed her eyes for a brief moment, trying to steal a few seconds of peace. She hadn't had much sleep the night before. She had stayed up late preparing for a presentation, rehearsing the words over and over in her head. She had to get it right. She had to show them she was more than just an intern. As the bus continued its route, Maya's exhaustion began to take over. Her eyelids grew heavy, and without realizing it, her head began to drift. The rhythmic motion of the bus was oddly soothing. It was almost as if the motion itself could ease the anxiety that had been building in her chest. The next thing Maya knew, her head had gently settled against someone's shoulder. At first, it didn't register. She didn't open her eyes, too tired to do anything more than acknowledge the comfort of the moment. Her body relaxed, and she felt the tension ease from her neck and shoulders. Whoever it was didn't seem to mind. There was no movement, no shift away from her. The stranger's shoulder was firm and warm, and it felt like a momentary escape from the stress that had consumed her life lately. She stayed like that for a few minutes, allowing herself to drift deeper into a half-sleep. The noise of the bus and the city fading into the background. Time seemed to lose its meaning in this peaceful stillness. There were no presentations to perfect, no emails to send, no one watching her every move. For the first time in a long while, Maya felt like she could just be. But soon the bus lurched to a stop and Maya's eyes fluttered open. She blinked, disoriented, as she realized where she was and what she had done. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she looked up, only to find herself still leaning on the stranger's shoulder. In a panic, she pulled herself back and quickly straightened up in her seat. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she muttered, her voice a little shaky. She had not meant to intrude on this person's space, let alone fall asleep on them. She quickly sat up, her hands clammy with embarrassment. The stranger turned his head toward her. His eyes were calm, but there was a kindness in his expression that made Maya feel at ease. He smiled gently, not in a mocking way, but with a sense of understanding. "No need to apologize," he said, his voice deep and reassuring. "You looked like you needed the rest." Maya stared at him for a moment, still processing the fact that she had just fallen asleep on a stranger. "Thank you," she managed, though she still felt a bit awkward. She glanced out the window, trying to avoid his gaze. For a moment, there was an awkward silence between them. Maya's mind raced, her heart still pounding from the embarrassment. She had just made an embarrassing mistake in front of a stranger, someone she would probably never see again. But the man beside her, though unfamiliar, had a calming presence, and his words seemed to take the edge off her discomfort. "It's fine," he said again, this time in a lighter tone. "We all need a little rest now and then." Maya couldn't help but let out a small, nervous laugh. She hadn't expected such an understanding response. She expected some kind of uncomfortable glance, maybe even a reprimand. But the stranger had offered a kindness that she hadn't anticipated. For the next few moments, they sat in silence as the bus made its way through the busy streets. Maya found herself stealing glances at the man beside her, but she quickly turned away, too embarrassed to look for too long. He seemed calm, well-dressed, and perhaps even a bit older than she was. He had the kind of quiet confidence that suggested he was someone important, someone who probably didn't ride the bus often. It didn't seem to match the image of the kind of person who would sit calmly and patiently on a bus in the middle of a busy morning commute, but she kept her thoughts to herself, too shy to ask anything. It wasn't as if she could start up a conversation with a stranger in a situation like this. She wasn't even sure how to begin after what had just happened. So instead, she stared at her shoes and tried to focus on the passing scenery outside the window. Eventually, the bus began to slow as it approached her stop. Maya gathered her belongings, ready to get off the bus and get on with her day. She still felt the sting of embarrassment, but there was also something else. A kind of relief, a quiet calm that she hadn't expected to feel. The stranger's kindness had helped ease her nerves, even if only for a moment. As the bus doors opened and she stood to leave, Maya glanced back at the man who had been so understanding. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring ahead, seemingly lost in thought. She didn't know who he was, but for some reason, she couldn't shake the feeling that she would remember this moment forever. And with that, Maya stepped off the bus, the cool morning air hitting her face as she walked toward her office. But something inside her had shifted. The stress and worry she had been carrying felt a little lighter, a little easier to bear. In a strange way, that brief encounter had been a reminder that sometimes, even on the busiest of days, the smallest moments of kindness could make all the difference. The next few days passed in a blur for Maya. She was so caught up in the whirlwind of tasks at work, the pressure to perform, and her desire to prove herself that she barely had time to reflect on the brief encounter she had had on the bus. Still, a part of her couldn't help but think about the man who had been so calm and understanding. The stranger had said something that stuck with her, how everyone needed rest now and then. It was simple advice, but it resonated with her in ways she hadn't expected. Maya often found herself replaying the moment in her head, especially during her commutes to and from work. She would think about how peaceful and understanding the man had been, and how he had helped her feel less embarrassed about what seemed like a silly mistake. The weight of her internship seemed a little less heavy in those moments when she allowed herself to think back to that brief encounter. But life at work had been anything but easy. Her inbox was flooded with tasks, and every time she thought she had caught up, more work seemed to appear. The presentation she had spent so much time preparing for had gone well, but it was only the beginning of the pressure. Her supervisors had asked for more, pushing her to deliver higher quality work, to prove that she had the skills and drive to take on even bigger responsibilities. She wanted to succeed so badly. She didn't want to disappoint them, but on the morning of another long workday, Maya found herself on the same bus again, making her way to the office. She had woken up earlier than usual that day, determined to get a head start on the tasks ahead. The pressure to perform had been weighing on her mind again, and she felt her energy levels slowly dipping lower and lower with every passing day. As she stood waiting for the bus, she tried to shake off the exhaustion that had settled deep in her bones. It wasn't just the work that was tiring her out. It was the uncertainty of her future. Being an intern was both exciting and terrifying. She was learning so much, but at the same time she couldn't shake the feeling that she was constantly walking on a tightrope. If she messed up, if she didn't perform at the highest level, would she still have a job at the end of her internship? Would she even be considered for a full-time role? She boarded the bus, the familiar mix of faces around her making her feel like she was part of something bigger, something routine. She found a seat by the window, like always, and let herself sink into the comfort of the bus ride. The noise around her faded as she stared out at the city streets, watching the buildings blur by. As the bus jolted and swerved through traffic, Maya closed her eyes for a moment, just needing a brief respite from her thoughts. She didn't mean to doze off, but the exhaustion from the previous days caught up with her. She felt her head lean toward the same shoulder as before, the one she had rested on during that moment of comfort. It was the same stranger. Maya froze when she realized what had happened. Her heart raced, her breath caught in her throat. She immediately pulled away, feeling a rush of panic. How could she have done this again? What would he think of her? It was bad enough the first time, but now, after all this time, to fall asleep again. Before she could pull away completely, a hand gently rested on her arm. The man's voice broke through her panic. "Hey, it's all right. You looked like you needed the rest." Maya looked up, wide-eyed, and found him smiling warmly at her, just as he had before. He didn't seem bothered at all by her mistake. In fact, he seemed more amused than anything, a kind, understanding glint in his eyes. He wasn't even angry or frustrated like she had imagined. It was as if he understood exactly how she was feeling. "I'm so sorry." she mumbled again, her face flushed with embarrassment. She pulled herself back into an upright position, but the man's calm demeanor made her feel like it wasn't the end of the world. His smile never wavered. "It's fine," he said, his voice reassuring. "You don't have to apologize. Everyone needs a little rest." For a moment, Maya was at a loss for words. She didn't know how to react. She felt both embarrassed and grateful at the same time. The bus continued on its route, and the man settled back into his seat, letting her gather her thoughts. She glanced at him from time to time, wondering if he remembered her from their first encounter. He didn't seem to recognize her, but something in the back of her mind told her that he did. Perhaps it was just a feeling, something intangible, but she couldn't shake the thought. A few moments passed in silence before he spoke again. This time he asked, "How's your day going so far?" Maya was surprised by the question. She had expected him to ignore her, maybe even move to a different seat. But here he was, trying to make conversation with her, as if nothing had happened. I'm all right," she replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "It's been a little busy at work, but I'm just trying to make the most of it. It's all a bit overwhelming sometimes." The man nodded, a knowing expression on his face. "I get that. The pressure can be intense, but it sounds like you're handling it well." Maya didn't know how to respond to that. She had barely even noticed that she was speaking with him so openly. There was something about the way he listened to her, the way he didn't rush to fill the silence, that made it easy for her to share her thoughts. Sometimes it feels like I'm not doing enough, she said, looking down at her hands. "I work hard, but I can't help but wonder if it's enough to prove I deserve a full-time position. I'm just so scared of messing up and missing out on this opportunity." The man didn't interrupt her. He let her speak, letting her get it all off her chest. When she finished, he leaned back slightly, his eyes thoughtful. "Everyone feels that way at some point," he said. "The truth is, no one has it all figured out. We all have to learn as we go. But the fact that you're worried about doing a good job, about giving it your best, well, that already says a lot about you. It shows you care, and that's more important than anything else." Maya was taken aback by his words. It wasn't what she expected to hear. She had thought he would offer some cliché advice like, "Just keep going," or "Don't worry about it." But this felt different. His words were honest and thoughtful, and they made her feel understood in a way she hadn't felt before. For a moment she sat quietly, letting his words sink in. She didn't know who this man was or why he was being so kind to her, but it didn't matter. There was something about him that made her feel like everything would be okay. Maybe things weren't perfect. Maybe she still had a long way to go, but she wasn't alone in feeling overwhelmed. Everyone had their struggles, and sometimes all it took was a kind word from a stranger to remind her that she was on the right path. As the bus neared her stop, Maya gathered her things, feeling a sense of calm she hadn't felt in days. She stood to leave, but before she stepped off, she turned to the man. "Thank you," she said, a genuine smile crossing her face. "I really needed to hear that." The man smiled back at her, nodding. "Anytime. Take care of yourself." And with that, Maya stepped off the bus, her heart a little lighter than before. She didn't know why this brief encounter had made such a difference, but she felt more confident than she had in a long time. Maybe it was just the reminder that kindness existed in the world, or maybe it was the fact that someone had taken the time to listen to her. Whatever it was, Maya knew that things would get better. Days turned into weeks, and Maya found herself falling into a routine. She was still navigating the whirlwind of her internship, trying to balance the expectations of her supervisors with her own need to prove herself. The work was demanding, but she was learning so much. The challenge wasn't just in the tasks at hand, but in finding a way to manage the anxiety that seemed to follow her wherever she went. She continued to take the bus to and from work, trying her best to focus on the day ahead. However, she couldn't shake the feeling of the strange connection she had felt with the man she had met on the bus, the one who had spoken to her with such kindness and understanding. She hadn't seen him again since that day, but the words he had said to her had stayed with her. Everyone needs a little rest. Simple advice, but it had impacted her in a way she hadn't expected. Maya often found herself thinking back to that encounter as she dealt with the daily grind of her internship. She remembered the calmness in his voice, the way he had reassured her when she had felt at her most vulnerable. It was strange how a moment that seemed so ordinary could have such a lasting effect. But for Maya, that brief conversation had given her the strength to face the challenges ahead. One morning, as Maya stepped onto the bus, she was feeling particularly exhausted. The previous day had been a blur of meetings, emails, and last-minute changes to the presentation she had been working on for weeks. She had stayed late at the office again, trying to perfect every detail, and had barely slept. Her body felt drained, and her mind wasn't much better. The pressure to deliver at the highest level was starting to wear on her, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up with the pace. As she found her usual seat by the window, she sighed deeply, her thoughts drifting as the bus began its journey through the city. The rhythmic sound of the bus moving over the road was a small comfort. It was a routine she had come to rely on, a brief moment of peace before the chaos of the day. She let her head lean against the window, hoping the cool glass would help clear her thoughts. It was then that she noticed him. He was sitting in the same spot as before, looking as calm and composed as he had the last time they had met. The man who had given her the kind words she so desperately needed. Maya couldn't believe her eyes. How was it possible that they had ended up on the same bus again? It felt almost like fate, or at least a strange coincidence. For a moment she hesitated. She wasn't sure if she should say anything, or if she should simply let the moment pass. The last thing she wanted was to come off as strange or intrusive. But the truth was, she felt a sense of connection to him, something beyond the brief moments they had shared on the bus. She had no idea who he was, but something about his presence had made her feel seen and understood. Before she could decide, the man turned and looked in her direction. His eyes lit up with recognition, and a smile crossed his face. "Hey, it's you again," he said, his voice warm and friendly. Maya felt a rush of relief mixed with surprise. "Wow, what are the odds?" she said, managing a smile. She hadn't expected him to remember her, but the fact that he did made her feel at ease. "I guess we're both creatures of habit," he said with a chuckle. "Same bus, same time. It's like we're on a never-ending loop." Maya laughed, feeling her nervousness start to fade. She had been worried that their second encounter would be awkward, but his easygoing nature put her at ease right away. They exchanged a few more words, small talk at first, about the weather, the traffic, and the usual mundane details that made up the daily grind. But it wasn't long before the conversation took a more personal turn. The man asked how Maya was doing, and she found herself telling him about the stress she had been under at work, the pressure to perform, the fear of falling short, and the exhaustion that seemed to follow her everywhere. She hadn't planned on sharing so much, but there was something about his. He listened intently, his expression thoughtful and kind. "I can see why that would be tough," he said after she finished speaking. "But from what I can tell, you're doing everything you can. It's clear you care about your work, and that's what matters most. Trust me, no one expects perfection." Maya felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. It was the same reassurance he had given her the first time they spoke. But this time it felt even more significant. She didn't know why she had ended up talking to him again, or why he was so willing to listen, but she couldn't help but feel thankful. His words had a way of putting things into perspective. As the bus made its way through the city, the conversation shifted. He told Maya a little about his life, how he had built his business from the ground up, how he had faced his own challenges along the way. He spoke with humility, never boasting but rather sharing his experiences in a way that felt genuine. Maya was fascinated by his story, but what struck her the most was the way he spoke about failure. He didn't shy away from it. Instead, he embraced it as part of the journey. "Failure isn't the end," he said. "It's a lesson. It teaches you something important about yourself and the world around you, but you have to be willing to learn from it, to keep going even when things don't go as planned." Maya nodded, absorbing his words. She had always been so afraid of failing, of not living up to expectations, but hearing him speak so openly about failure made her realize that maybe it wasn't something to fear. Maybe it was something to embrace, to learn from, and to use as a stepping stone toward success. The conversation continued as the bus made its way through the city streets. Maya found herself feeling lighter, more at ease than she had in weeks. The weight of the pressure she had been carrying seemed to lift, if only for a moment. And even though she knew the challenges at work weren't going to disappear, she felt like she had a new perspective. As the days continued to pass, Maya found herself carrying the wisdom from her conversations with the stranger on the bus. She could feel a subtle shift within herself. The pressure at work remained, but she began to see things from a different perspective. Instead of constantly worrying about what might go wrong, she focused more on the lessons she could learn from every challenge. His words about failure stuck with her. Failure isn't the end. It's a lesson. Maya still faced moments of doubt, like when her supervisors gave her new tasks with even higher expectations. They seemed pleased with her work, but that only made her feel more nervous. It was as if every small success built a higher tower of pressure. But whenever those feelings started to overwhelm her, she would think back to her bus ride with the stranger. The memory of his calm demeanor and reassuring words helped her remember that it was okay to not have all the answers. She began to embrace the challenges instead of fearing them. She found herself taking more risks, trusting her intuition and accepting that mistakes were part of the process. Maya even started to enjoy her work more, finding creative solutions to problems she once would have avoided out of fear of failure. On one particular morning, Maya felt especially exhausted as she boarded the bus. The previous week had been a particularly difficult one. She had worked long hours to prepare for an important meeting with a potential client, but it hadn't gone as smoothly as she had hoped. She had felt embarrassed during the meeting, unsure of her presentation, and left feeling as though she had failed. It was a hard pill to swallow, especially after she had put so much effort into it. She had barely slept the night before and was still feeling the weight of it. But as she entered the bus, she noticed that the same man was sitting in his usual spot. For a moment she hesitated, not sure if she should approach him. The last time they had spoken, it had been a calm, pleasant conversation. But today, Maya didn't feel like talking. She felt embarrassed, ashamed even, for not living up to her own expectations. Still, as the bus started moving and she sat down in her usual seat, she couldn't help but notice the man glancing her way. He smiled warmly as if he could sense her discomfort. His expression was the same as before, calm, understanding, kind. "Hey, you look like you've had a rough day," he said gently, his voice offering the same reassurance she remembered. Maya was taken aback. She hadn't even said a word, yet somehow he had noticed. Maybe it was just the way she was sitting, or the way her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. Whatever it was, his ability to sense her mood felt comforting, like he genuinely cared. "It's just one of those days," Maya replied with a forced smile, trying not to let her frustration show. "I feel like I'm not doing well, you know? Like no matter how hard I try, it's just not enough." The man nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand. You know, there's a saying, the harder you try, the more you fail." Maya furrowed her brow. "I don't think I've heard that one before. It's not a very popular one, but I find it to be true. Sometimes when we push too hard, we actually get in our own way. We try so hard to control everything, to get it perfect, but it's the imperfections that lead us to our best moments. You're doing great. Don't forget that." Maya looked at him in surprise. His words, though simple, hit her like a wave of clarity. She had been so focused on achieving perfection that she hadn't given herself the grace to just be. The truth was, she didn't have to be perfect. It was okay to make mistakes. She wasn't a robot, she was human. And sometimes the imperfections were what made her journey real and meaningful. A sense of relief washed over her as she absorbed what he had said. "I guess I've been too hard on myself," Maya admitted, looking out the window as the city passed by. "I just really want to do well. I want to prove myself." "I get it," the man said, leaning back in his seat. "We all do. But proving yourself isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about showing up. Even when you're tired, even when you've had setbacks, you're already doing more than enough by showing up every day and trying your best." Maya sat quietly for a moment, contemplating his words. She had been so focused on achieving perfection that she had forgotten what it meant to simply show up, to keep going, even when things didn't go as planned. She had been afraid of failure, afraid of making mistakes, but now she understood that mistakes were just part of the process. They weren't the end of the road. They were part of the journey. For the rest of the bus ride, Maya and the man continued to talk. She opened up to him more than she had ever expected, sharing her struggles and her fears. It felt good to talk to someone who was so understanding, someone who listened without judgment. He shared more about his own journey, how he had faced many failures and challenges along the way. But instead of seeing those moments as setbacks, he had viewed them as opportunities to learn and grow. By the time the bus neared Maya's stop, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The heaviness that had been weighing on her seemed to lift. She still had a long way to go, but she no longer felt so burdened by the pressure to be perfect. Maya stood up, gathering her things, but before she stepped off the bus, she turned to the man. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I really needed to hear that today." The man smiled, his expression kind. "Anytime. Remember, you're doing great. Just keep going." Maya smiled back, feeling lighter than she had in days. As she stepped off the bus and into the busy street, she knew that she still had challenges ahead of her, but she also knew she could handle them. With every setback, there was a lesson to be learned. With every failure, there was an opportunity for growth. And as long as she kept showing up, she would continue to move forward one step at a time. Maya's life continued, now touched by the lessons she had learned from the man on the bus. Each day the work was still hard, and the expectations from her supervisors remained high. But there was something different now. Maya had learned to take a step back when the pressure started to build. She had learned that her worth wasn't determined by every success or failure, but by her persistence, her drive, and her ability to learn and grow from everything she experienced. The lessons the man had shared with her were no longer just words. They were guiding her through her daily challenges. It wasn't that the pressure had disappeared. It was still there, lurking in the background, waiting for a moment when it could creep up on her. But instead of feeling paralyzed by it, she now faced it head-on, knowing that even if she stumbled, it didn't mean she had failed. It meant she was growing. The next few weeks were busy ones, filled with more late nights at the office and long days of back-to-back meetings. Yet somehow Maya felt lighter. She was handling the stress better than before, and every time she felt overwhelmed, she remembered the words the stranger had said to her. "Failure isn't the end. It's a lesson." His simple wisdom was a constant companion, offering her calm and perspective. One day, during a particularly hectic week, Maya found herself on the bus once again, her mind swirling with everything that needed to be done. She had been working on a big project for weeks, and she was starting to feel the exhaustion from putting so much into it. Her shoulders were tense, and her head was filled with all the tasks she still needed to complete. She could feel the pressure building, and for the first time in a while, she began to doubt herself again. Was she really cut out for this? Maya took her usual seat near the window, her gaze focused on the city passing by. She didn't notice the man at first, lost in her own thoughts. But then she felt that familiar, comforting presence. She looked up and found him sitting across from her, a small, knowing smile on his face. "Long day?" he asked, his voice soft and kind. Maya nodded slowly, feeling a sense of relief just from seeing him. It had been weeks since their last conversation, but his presence still had the same calming effect on her. "Yeah," she replied, her voice a little strained. "It's been one of those days. Too much to do, too little time. I'm starting to feel like I'm drowning in all of it." The man's smile deepened and he leaned back in his seat. "I get that. But sometimes the most important thing is to give yourself permission to slow down. You can't keep running at full speed forever. Your body and mind need rest too." Maya felt her shoulders relax slightly at his words. It was a reminder she needed. She had been so caught up in the demands of her work that she had forgotten to take care of herself. She had been pushing herself to the limit, not allowing herself time to recharge. His words were a gentle nudge to stop and take a breath. "I've been so focused on keeping up with everything that I've been neglecting myself," Maya admitted. "I'm starting to burn out." "That's normal," he said. "Burnout happens when you don't listen to your body. You have to take breaks, rest when you need it. It's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. And working smarter means knowing when to take a step back and recharge." Maya thought about his words. She had been so focused on proving herself that she hadn't considered the importance of self-care. She had been so concerned with doing everything perfectly that she had forgotten to give herself grace. She needed to learn how to balance work with rest, to allow herself to take breaks and recharge without feeling guilty. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "I really needed to hear that." The man gave her a reassuring smile. We all need reminders sometimes. You're doing great. Just don't forget to take care of yourself along the way. Maya smiled back, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't have all the answers, but that was okay. She didn't have to be perfect. The most important thing was to keep going, to keep learning, and to take care of herself as she did. As the bus neared her stop, Maya stood up to leave, but before she stepped off, she turned back to the man. Take care of yourself too, she said with a smile. I hope you get the rest you need. He chuckled and nodded. I will. Thanks and good luck with everything. I'm sure you'll do great. Maya stepped off the bus, her heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. The weight of the pressure she had been carrying seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of clarity. She had learned that it wasn't just about pushing through the hard times. It was about finding balance, about knowing when to work and when to rest. And most importantly, it was about being kind to herself along the way. The rest of the day went by much smoother than she had expected. She wasn't perfect, but she didn't need to be. She was learning and growing, and that was enough. She had finally begun to understand that the journey was just as important as the destination, and with each step she was moving forward, no matter how small. The days continued to pass, and Maya found herself on that bus again and again. Each ride was a small moment of respite, a chance to reflect and reset. And each time the man was there, offering his quiet wisdom, reminding her of the importance of rest, balance, and kindness to oneself. By now, she had grown comfortable in her own skin. She no longer tried to be perfect. She knew that her worth wasn't tied to how much she could accomplish or how flawlessly she could perform. She was enough just as she was, and that made all the difference. The weeks rolled by, and Maya continued to adapt to the lessons she had learned from the stranger on the bus. She had grown stronger, more aware of herself and the balance she needed in her life. Her work remained demanding, but she no longer felt as overwhelmed as she once had. There was a sense of calm that had started to settle within her, a calm she had found through learning to embrace imperfection, to accept that life's unpredictability was a part of her growth. One morning, as she boarded the bus, she noticed something different. The man was already there, sitting in his usual spot, but there was a slight shift in the way he carried himself. He looked a little more tired than usual, his face drawn with a hint of exhaustion that Maya hadn't seen before. It was strange to see him in this state, as he had always been a calm and reassuring presence in her life. Without thinking, Maya walked over to where he was sitting, her curiosity getting the better of her. As she took her seat, she hesitated for a moment before speaking up. Are you okay? She asked gently, her concern evident in her voice. The man turned to her, a small, tired smile crossing his face. I'm fine, he said, though his voice lacked its usual energy. Just a little worn out. It's been a long few weeks, and I'm feeling the weight of it all. Maya could sense the difference in his demeanor, and for the first time, she realized that even the person who had given her so much wisdom and guidance was not immune to the pressures of life. He, too, had his struggles. You know, I think you're the first person who has ever asked me that, he said with a laugh, though it was faint. Everyone assumes I'm always okay, that I've got it all figured out. But the truth is, sometimes I feel just as overwhelmed as anyone else. Maya listened quietly, taking in his words. For so long she had looked to him for answers, thinking that he was someone who had it all together. But now she realized that even he had moments of weakness, moments when he felt lost or tired. It was a humbling thought, and it reminded her that no one was immune to the challenges of life. I think that's something we all need to remember, Maya said after a moment. No one has everything figured out. We all have our moments of doubt, of uncertainty, but it's how we handle those moments that really matters. The man looked at her, a genuine smile beginning to return to his face. You're absolutely right, he said. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that we have to have all the answers, that we have to be perfect. But the truth is, we're all just doing the best we can. Maya nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie with him. For the first time, she saw him not as a mentor, but as someone who, like her, was still figuring things out. And that realization was both comforting and empowering. The bus ride passed quickly, filled with light conversation. The man spoke a little more about his recent challenges, how the demands of his work had been weighing heavily on him. He told Maya that he had been pushing himself too hard, trying to meet everyone's expectations, and it had taken a toll on his health. He had been running on empty for weeks, and it was starting to catch up with him. I think I've been neglecting the one thing I tell everyone else to do. Rest, he admitted, his voice carrying a hint of self-awareness. I've been so focused on achieving my goals that I forgot to take care of myself. And now I'm paying the price. Maya couldn't help but empathize with him. She had been in that same place not too long ago, pushing herself to the limit without taking the time to recharge. But hearing him admit it made her realize that it was okay to not have everything under control. Sometimes it was okay to pause, to admit that you needed rest, that you needed to step back and take care of yourself. I think we all need a reminder every once in a while, Maya said softly, to slow down and take care of ourselves. The man smiled, his eyes lighting up with gratitude. You're absolutely right, he said. And sometimes it takes someone else reminding us of that. I've been so focused on my work that I forgot to listen to my body, but now I'm going to take a step back, rest, and recharge. It's the only way to move forward. Maya smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She had spent so much time thinking about the future, about the next step, about her career and all the things she still wanted to achieve. But now she realized that it wasn't just about the destination. It was about the journey, about taking care of herself along the way. As the bus neared her stop, Maya stood up, preparing to leave. She turned to the man, her heart full of gratitude for the reminder he had given her. Take care of yourself, she said, her voice sincere. I hope you get the rest you need, he smiled warmly. Thank you, Maya, and you too. Remember to take care of yourself. It's just as important as everything else. Maya stepped off the bus with a renewed sense of purpose. She still had a long way to go, still had challenges to face, but now she knew that it was okay to take a step back when needed. It was okay to rest, to recharge, and to care for herself along the way. The journey was long, but it was hers to navigate, and she would do it at her own pace with kindness and patience for herself. The days continued, but now Maya felt more grounded. She was learning that balance wasn't about perfection. It was about finding harmony in the chaos, about taking one step at a time, and about giving herself the space to breathe. The stranger on the bus had taught her so much, but the most important lesson of all was one she had learned herself, that the journey mattered just as much as the destination, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to stop and rest. Maya had learned many valuable lessons from the stranger on the bus. She had gained the ability to view her challenges from a different perspective. She had stopped worrying about perfection and had started embracing the journey with all its ups and downs. Her work had become more manageable, and her mindset had shifted from one of stress and fear to one of growth and understanding. Life wasn't about getting everything right. It was about showing up, learning, and allowing herself to rest when needed. But as much as she had grown, Maya knew she had a long way to go. There were still moments when the pressure would catch up to her, when doubts would cloud her mind. She wasn't perfect, and neither was anyone else, but she had learned to stop chasing perfection and to focus on progress instead. She wasn't trying to be someone else. She was learning how to be the best version of herself. It was a rainy day when Maya found herself sitting on the bus again, her thoughts swirling in the quiet hum of the engine. She had been busy at work, focusing on a major project that had kept her occupied for weeks. The deadline was looming, and she could feel the familiar weight of pressure beginning to settle on her shoulders. But today, there was something different in the air. It wasn't just the rain outside or the quiet of the bus ride. It was something inside her, something that had shifted ever since her conversation with the man. She felt a deep sense of calm, a new sense of understanding about herself and the world around her. Maya took her usual seat, and as she looked out the window, lost in thought, she felt that comforting presence beside her once again. The man was there, sitting across from her, his eyes gentle and understanding. His appearance hadn't changed, but Maya could tell he had noticed the subtle shift in her. You seem a little quieter than usual today, he said, his voice soft. What's on your mind? Maya hesitated for a moment before replying. I've been working on a big project at work. The deadline is coming up, and I feel like there's so much left to do. It's starting to feel overwhelming again. The man nodded slowly. I understand. Deadlines can create a lot of pressure, and it can be hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when everything is happening so fast. But you've come a long way, haven't you? You've learned how to handle the pressure better. Maya smiled weakly. I have, but it still feels heavy sometimes. I guess that's the thing I'm still trying to figure out, how to balance everything without feeling so overwhelmed. The man thought for a moment before responding. Balance is tricky. It's not about finding a perfect formula. It's about knowing when to push forward and when to step back. You can't give your best if you're constantly running on empty. Remember that taking a break isn't a failure. It's a way to refuel and keep going. Maya absorbed his words, feeling the weight of them settle in her heart. It was something she had heard,